The Smith-Morra Gambit is a very aggressive and powerful gambit against the Sicilian defense, in which white sacrifices a pawn in exchange for good development of his pieces. In this video you will learn how to play against the Smith-Morra Gambit. After the moves e4, c5, the Sicilian defense is proposed. Now, white can play d4, occupying the center with his pawns. Black responds with c takes d4, eliminating white's central pawn and exchanging it for his side pawn, leaving black with a majority of central pawns. Now, white can play c3, the Smith-Morra Gambit, which is one of the most dangerous gambits that white has at his disposal to play against the Sicilian defense. If he wishes, black can now reject the gambit with the move d3. Or he can also play knight f6, developing the king's knight and threatening to capture the e4 pawn. After e5, knight d5. The a la pin variation has been reached by transposition with white's move c3. Although after the move c3, the best option for black is to accept the offered pawn by capturing on c3. After knight takes c3, black can play knight c6, developing his queen's knight on its natural square. White can play knight f3, developing his king's knight. Black can reply d6, increasing control over the e5 square and allowing the development of his queen's bishop. White can play bishop c4, developing his king's bishop onto a good diagonal and preparing to castle. The plan for white is to develop his pieces to good squares, short castling, queen e2, to place his king's rook on the d1 square and press along the d-file. He can follow up with moves like bishop f4 or bishop g5 and finally rook to c1. Now, it would be a serious mistake to move bishop g4, with the idea of pinning the white knight. Since white can sacrifice the bishop with bishop takes f7 check and win. Since after king takes f7, white plays knight g5 check and then can capture the black bishop, thus regaining the piece and gaining an advantage. After the move bishop c4, the key move for black is a6. A good move, which controls the b5 square and prevents the white pieces from making use of that square. Now, the move knight g5, attacking the f7 point, is not dangerous, since black simply replies e6. And then they can continue with moves like b5, knight e5, bishop e7, knight f6, etc., and they have no problem. After the move a6, the best option for white is short castling. Black can play knight f6, developing his king's knight and keeping the path to his queen's bishop clear as long as possible. For example, if white now plays queen e2, black can respond with bishop g4, developing his bishop and pinning the opponent's knight. Black can follow up with moves like rook c8, e6, knight d4 or knight e5, bishop e7, etc. White can play rook d1, activating his king's rook and starting to put pressure along the d-file. Black plays e6, blocking the action of the bishop on c4 and preparing to develop his king's bishop, so that he can then castle. White can play bishop f4, completing the development of his minor pieces and increasing the pressure against the d6 pawn. But now black can make the move knight h5, which is a very good move. To fight against the Smith-Morra Gambit, one of the secrets for black is to play on the attack, because if they play passively, they could end up in a very bad position. Now the white bishop is attacked and has no good squares to retreat to. For example, in case of bishop g3, black plays knight takes g3. And after h takes g3, black plays h5, with the idea of attacking with h4, and has an advantage. And in case of bishop e3, black plays knight e5, attacking the bishop on c4 and increasing the pressure on the pin on f3. After, for example, bishop b3, black plays bishop e7, completing the development of his minor pieces and preparing to castle. After bishop a4, check. Black simply plays king f8 and can continue with moves like rook c8, bishop takes f3, bishop g5, etc. and has an advantage. And if white plays bishop g5, attacking the black queen, black simply plays queen takes g5. And after knight takes g5, black answers bishop takes e2. And after knight takes e2, black plays bishop e7, completing the development of his minor pieces and threatening to capture the white knight. After knight f3, black plays knight f6, returning his knight to the center. Then he can castle and can place his rook on the c-file, and black, who keeps an extra pawn, has a clear advantage. After the move knight f6, white can develop his queen bishop to the g5 square, threatening to capture on f6 to double the black pawns. Now, the move bishop g4 would be a mistake, since white plays queen b3, with the double threat on f7 and b7 and wins. After the move bishop g5, black can play e6, blocking the action of the bishop on c4 and avoiding being left with doubled pawns. White can continue with queen e2, mobilizing his queen to connect the rooks. White's plan is to bring his rooks to the d and c files, and he will have a very good attacking position. But now black can play h6, which is a very good move. Black forces the white bishop to make a decision. For example, in case bishop takes f6. Black plays queen takes f6 and has an advantage, since he has an extra pawn and preserves the bishop pair. If after the move h6 white withdraws his bishop to the h4 square, black plays g5, attacking the enemy bishop again. Black can attack this way, since he keeps two pawns in the center and his central position is perfectly safe. After bishop g3, black plays knight h5, which will eliminate the opponent's dark squared bishop and keep the advantage. And if after the move h6 the white bishop retreats to the f4 square, black plays g5, attacking the enemy bishop again. In case of bishop e3, black can play knight g4, attacking the enemy bishop again, which has to retreat to a passive square. For example, bishop d2. After bishop g7, black keeps his extra pawn, has his pieces very actively placed and can continue with moves like knight g to e5, b5, etc. and has the advantage. In the following video we will study a very instructive master game in which we will see how black applies all these ideas to successfully fight against the Smith-Morra Gambit.